Good evening. Welcome to the Policy Committee meeting, December 14th. Has it been properly posted?
Yes, it has.
Has been, okay. Patrick thought he might make it here. He's got something tied up, and so far he's not here, and I don't expect him actually at this point. Now would be the general business opportunity for public to address us. And we do have a couple sign up tonight. So where we have, in timing on this, we have maybe changed that policy a little bit, and that if we have less than 6 speakers, we will allow you to go up to a full 5 minutes if you want to. You don't have to, but we will advise you of the time at 3 minutes. Well, you're going to be able to see it, quite simply. But maximum of 5 minutes. To complete that, we expect all speakers to honor our time limit, refrain from using any inappropriate language in any manner, and be respectful in their comments. Speakers are here to address the board and not to address the audience. Speakers who do not meet these expectations may be prohibited from speaking at future board meetings or committee meetings. We also expect that the audience will be respectful of the speaker and of the board, and refrain from responding with verbal comments, cheering, applause, or other behavior that will detract from the meeting. Please note that no obstructions can be created between the board and the audience, and that the area between the speaker and the podium will be clear during public comment. Also, in order to respect our speakers and meeting participants, and for everybody, please silence your cell phone. Our first speaker this evening is Stacy Keene, and followed by Sammy.
Hi, my name is Stacy Keene. I really wasn't planning on speaking to the school board. After what our community has been through the last few weeks, I just wanted everyone to have a rest. I wanted to rest. But I do want to thank the administration because I felt you have taken care of our students and done so many wonderful things with them for the last few weeks through all of this. So I'm sure I'm going to upset some teachers tonight. However, I want to start by saying that there are so many teachers that my children have had, most of them that are wonderful and do their jobs. I'm not speaking to them. But I am done being silent on this issue. I am disgusted by the behavior of some of our teachers and the union president, Carrie Kumro. I hope that's how you say her name. We have had several teachers come forward with an email from Carrie. These teachers are disgusted with the union behavior, but are afraid to come forward because these people can be vicious. But I'm going to be their voice. The union president's email outlines months of insubordination of a kindergarten special ed teacher. She was told to take the pride flag down, but she refused multiple times. Kindergarten is not the place for activism. Then to be outright insubordinate is a disgrace. But now the union is rallying for Rainbows for Sarah on Friday. They are encouraging the teachers and students to wear pride and rainbow gear to support this teacher. They are encouraging taking pictures and sending them to her in solidarity. And I have this email as proof. Earlier in the year, the union passed out safe space buttons to each teacher. Many wear to buck the system, and many because they are afraid not to. The union promotes and encourages teachers to fight Dr. Siebert, and excuse me for saying this, but just give them the middle finger, quite frankly. If you want to advocate for a cause, then do so outside of school, but not on my tax dollar. They are paid to educate my child, not to protest in the classroom. What makes this all so much more disturbing is Carrie ended her email telling teachers the Alliance group are getting the word out to the students for her. She is working with this group to involve our children, and I will not stand for it. The Alliance for Education pushes activism and union politics disguised as an education group. Free lunch attack on all of you started with them. The Milwaukee Teachers Union brought here by them. The Overpass Light Brigade Circus was brought here by them. The lawsuit brought forth against all of you, you guessed it, it's from them. Teachers, keep your activism away from my children. You are paid to teach, not to be an activist. They are taking away from giving my children the best education they deserve.
2 minutes.
Enough of the divide. Enough telling kids they are only safe with teachers who have signs. These teachers had a golden opportunity to have meaningful conversations with their students. Think where we could be today if they instead told students they are more than a sign. They could have told them they are safe with any teacher in any building, and a sign isn't what keeps them safe. It's the people in the building that keeps them safe. Instead, these teachers became activists and used their students as their army to push an agenda. Our children are not pawns in their social warfare. Stay in your lane and educate our kids. They are not the teachers to inflict their ideology. Just teach the class and do nothing else. Here's my suggestion for Friday. Instead of a rainbow day to support an insubordinate teacher, how about a school spirit day where each school can wear their spirit wear or their school colors, to where our focus should be the students and their connection through their wonderful schools. That's what I hope happens on Friday instead. Thank you.
Thank you, Stacy. Sam D'Amico?
Good evening. Tonight, just to go off of what Stacy first said, I would also like to thank administration for the overwhelming amount of support you have given staff and students the last few weeks. Tonight I'd like to talk about an incident that took place Friday, December the 10th. Sarah Whaley, a special education kindergarten teacher, was suspended without pay for 1 day for refusing to take down her Progress LGBTQ+ flag in her classroom. This had previously been the topic of conversations ever since October that the flag had to be removed, and Sarah Whaley declined. There are a few reasons I strongly disagree with the action that was taken by administration. For one, I know Sarah's aunt, Monica Whaley, a teacher at East, and Monica's wife, a former physical education teacher at Horning, and when I heard that Monica's niece had been suspended, it just made me a little confused before I heard what happened, just wondering why someone of a family who has been known to have great educators was suspended. Sarah is a special education teacher, an occupation that Mr. Dietz, as you should agree with very personally, is an occupation that should be greatly and significantly respected, as you're a former special education teacher yourself. We've heard of a teacher shortage in districts. I know it's been said in our district before, and suspending a special education teacher in an elementary setting is not good for those students who have gotten used to and have a relationship with that teacher. And it's also not good, it's also not particularly preferable for a district that I'm sure could use a few more teachers. And if you disagree with that, you could ask any teacher who feels their workload has been piling up. I am very glad that Sarah's suspension was only for 1 day, and she returned to her classroom yesterday, Monday. However, that does not fix what happened. A directive was sent out via email in August that all pride flags, Black Lives Matter flags, and Blue Lives Matter flags, and signage of all of those would be removed. As I have said before, it seems administration keeps just adding to this and making this policy up as we go along. A policy that was first intended for political signage, Black Lives Matter, Blue Lives Matter, and LGBTQ signage and flags for high schools, is now the vessel through which Sarah Whaley, a elementary school teacher, was suspended without pay. The policy keeps changing and keeps getting added to. And if administration wanted to apply this to all schools, they would have said that from the beginning. But that was not the intention. However, that is now what is apparently happening. If Dr. Siebert had sent out an email every time the policy had apparently been added to, I'm sure teachers and principals would have expected many emails, as the policy has far progressed from what it was in August. I am calling on administration to do a few things to right this wrong. Number one, to provide Sarah Whaley with back pay from the day that you forced her to miss. Remove or prevent her suspension from being recorded by her employer.
2 minutes.
And administration needs to send a personal apology to Sarah Whaley, and so does the Board of Education. They need to send a personal apology to Sarah Whaley on behalf of the actions of administration, specifically the Human Resources Committee, if this is not something Joseph Como would support doing as a full board. And number 5, administration needs to send an email that no staff member needs to fear suspension over having a pride flag in their classroom in the future, especially since this directive was not meant for elementary and middle school and middle schools. I doubt these actions will ever happen. However, it would make administration, our school board, and our district look very poorly if they didn't. What happened, happened, but now is your time to fix it. Thank you.
Thank you, Sam. Excuse me. That we will move on to the rest of our meeting. First action item is the approval of the minutes of our November meeting. So I'm looking for,
I was absent.
pardon? Oh, you were absent, that's right.
So moved.
Moved by Anthony,
Second.
seconded by Kelly. Any discussion on the items in the minutes? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting the minutes from November, please say aye.
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 Opposed? 4-0. Julie?
One abstain.
And an abstain, I'm sorry, thank you.
Yep.
You are here today, so that's good.
Yep.
Okay. That moves us into a series of action items on policies, quite a series, that we'll be dealing with, some that we've discussed previously and some that we brought away and back, and a large cluster of them that are newly received. So, let us start with approving the revisions to policy 0144.3, 1130, 3230, and 4230, all dealing with basically the same situation, dealing with the description, definition of conflict of interest. The policy has been updated to reflect current legal standards with regard to the conflict of interest standards. These policies have been revised to clarify that no member of the board or the district staff should have a personal or financial interest where a question of conflict with their duties could be raised. Further, the revisions reflect the specific pecuniary interest provision of the Wisconsin statute 19.59. Substantial value is defined in that statute. And a lot of what we were trying to do with this is make sure that we are consistent that we have 4 different policies here. I'm going to initiate this with the revision of policy 0144.3. This one is directed separately from the other staff as a Board of Education policy on conflict of interest. I think because we have a very similar reading, I'm going to read this as well because it will repeat. Board members shall also perform their duties in a manner that does not violate criminal conflict of interest laws pursuant to 946.13 of Wisconsin statutes by having a private pecuniary interest in a contract with the district in an amount that exceeds $15,000 annually, or by participating in making or performing some function as a board member with respect to a contract in which the board member has a private pecuniary interest unless statutory exceptions apply. Questions or presentation or observations from anybody? Joe, did you have anything you wanted to add to this?
Yeah, we did try to capture the conversation at the last several meetings on this policy. As it pertains to the bylaws, 0144.3, we did add language in under item E, just for some clarification around that $15,000, because we did have substantial discussion. Is that too high of a threshold? The recommendation is what triggers I think the felony level, for a public official, by adding in there the language by participating in making or performing some function. We did not include the gift amount at this time, the $25. We certainly could put that in this policy, but we wanted to bring that forward for the committee. It was discussed, do we add $25 limit for a gift or not? It is in the staff policies that they say a low-value gift is $25 or less. So just to try to capture what we've talked about over the last couple of months.
Okay. Any board members have any changes that they want or concerns they have? Kelly, excuse me.
I actually like the way the change is proposed, and I think because the, anything of value is defined in the staff policy as $25, I think that kind of sets a precedent for the district. And it keeps the board bylaws simplified, so I'm comfortable with the changes on this one.
Do you want to make a motion on it?
Sure. I would move to approve policy 144.3 as submitted.
Yes, but, okay. Seconded by,
Second.
Anthony, you had your hand up
Go ahead.
first. Further further questions? Again, for anybody that's watching, this is not a first time that we've been through this. We've had this around for a couple of months, wanting to, never to cause it to change significantly, but to make sure it's well covered by everything that's in there, and it'll be consistent. So if there's no further discussions, all in favor of accepting 0144.3, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Julie?
Call this number, right?
Sure.
What was that?
Call this number.
Okay.
It's on the other end of the line.
Somebody new in the room.
Who would you like to call?
Just call my mom.
Well, while we're working on a technical curiosity,
McCaffrey. See where you go.
the three policies also of the conflict of interest category are just separated by, the first policy is dealing with administration, the second is dealing with professional staff, and the last is dealing with support staff. In my understanding of this, there's no differences.
Oh, correct. They're all the same language. The update is the same in all of the policies by employee group.
And again, it'll be repeating some of the same things. For instance, the $15,000, that's a felony level is stated in here in all three.
The definition of nominal value of $25 or less is also there.
Yeah. And again, that's just, if you're given a gift of some kind and it's below that, we're not going to dig into it,
Correct.
right?
And that just covers your general mug if you go somewhere, T-shirt if you go somewhere. It's, some standard stuff if you were to go to a conference. For instance, the WASB conference coming up here in January. Sometimes school board members go through there with their little totes, and if we're passing out mugs, pencils, whatever it is, there's just no worry about grabbing that stuff from our vendors.
I guarantee you won't get wealthy on any of that stuff.
The 14th.
Okay. Any changes or curiosity? Again, we've been through this before. If I see no further requirements, I would ask for a motion on this one.
I'll move to approve,
And by the way, if you wish to take all three of them, that's your choice.
I'll move to approve policies 1330,
No, excuse me, 1130.
or 1130, excuse me, 3230, and 4230 as presented.
Thank you. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded. Further discussion or questions on these three policies, which all read the same? Seeing none, and all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? Another 4-0, Julie. Oops. The next policy is a standalone by itself, 2430, district-sponsored clubs and activities. The policy is revised to better reflect the scope of district-sponsored student clubs and activities that are not strictly curricular-related. Joe, do you have any updates or?
Dr. Piasek, at the last meeting, I don't want to speak for you, Dr. Piasek, but you did ask questions as to how does a sport club, whatever it is, become affiliated with the district or connected to the district. We have included for your review the sheet that a club must complete. Our athletic directors manage this for us. It's entitled School District of Waukesha Youth Sports Feeder Program Request. It outlines, I think that's 9 points on there that the club must maintain. And then they can become connected to us, which includes nonprofit status, have insurance to meet the SDW minimums, agree to facility use expectations, provide the site athletic director with documentation, work collaboratively with the high school coach, so on and so forth. Background checks are included in there, parent conduct agreements, approve the use of any school logos with appropriate site, so that there is a verification piece to this, this validation piece to this.
And again, this, oh, go ahead. No, I was just going to say, this is something we've looked at for a couple of our meetings, and we wanted it to be polished enough that it was useful here. So, now,
If I could comment, thank you. And so I have had experience as a parent on the athletic club side of things, and I know that some of this kind of evolved a few years back related to use of facilities, so I do have some experience with this form, which I want to come back to. I think specifically related to the language in the policy, I'm comfortable with that, but there was this mention of, I have to find my notes here, there was this mention of competitive athletics. Now I can't find the word.
It's the third paragraph from the bottom, such activities along with competitive extracurricular, that one.
Thank you. Competitive extracurricular activities or athletics.
are you on, you're looking in the policy.
Right. So that would not include like a ski club, for example.
So, like the ski club, in what manner? So the ski club would be a high school.
Are we saying that's a
club.
district sponsor? Well, there's a middle school ski club, for example. So are we saying that's a district-sponsored club or activity, or are we saying that only if the sport is competitive?
We have a policy that covers, trying to think right now. So the athletic,
Clubs and extracurricular.
we have the athletic policy, which is referenced, I don't know if we have it attached this month or not. We did discuss the the WIAA athletic policy under the home-based private. It goes back a couple of meetings. It does cover middle school athletics, so I would have to reference back to that policy right now, and I'm sorry, I don't have it.
But
No, that's okay. I guess maybe to simplify the question is just the rationale behind the addition of the word competitive, because that's an add.
It is. And that would be for the,
well, it says such as competitive. There's other activities in the first sentence, such activities.
But what would be different between saying competitive extracurricular activities and athletics versus extracurricular activities and
Oh.
athletics?
so the example that I think of was a few years back with lacrosse. When lacrosse sat as club status, that was a high school level sport. It wasn't WIAA sanctioned at the time. They played a competitive schedule with officials, but it took a number of years before that became a district-sponsored WIAA sport. It sat in club status at that time. That would be the one example, the clear example that comes to my mind from a competitive standpoint. Whereas some clubs are activity-based, there's no score at the end, and
Right.
we're very familiar with that.
And I guess I would just put this out to the rest of the committee. Is there any concern that we're limiting the scope of the policy by including the word competitive, is my only concern.
Are you asking if it's included only competitive? Is that what you're, I'm not sure what,
I don't understand the reason.
The reasoning
word.
for adding that.
the word competitive? And that, is that what you're talking, such activities, along with competitive extracurricular activities and athletics? So that's where you are? I guess you're saying is that word be,
Just, I don't know.
does it really need that word in there? I understand what you're
Yeah.
saying.
It could unintentionally limit
Yes, we
the
can,
scope of the policy to competitive athletics, and I think there are athletics, and I'm using ski club as an example, although I know there are competitive ski clubs, but,
So we don't need the word competitive, I think is a suggestion, and I understand that now. You okay with that, Greg?
I think it could make it confusing if it was left in there.
That's what she's saying.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I agree.
Yeah, to your point, Mr. Baumgart, I do see, it says such activities, and then, along with, that's kind of a separate issue. It then goes on to talk about, clubs, associations, organizations. You wouldn't necessarily think those are competitive things, always, but I guess the word competitive makes it more cumbersome, and I'm fine with.
That's a good word.
Yeah, but I think if we already have a policy that kind of defines that, then.
over the athletics, sorry.
Yep. Yeah, it certainly could be taken out, and the policy could be implemented and effective in our district without the word competitive.
Okay.
So the other topic that I just wanted to bring up, it's not clear to me that this form is being consistently widely used with all programs. And there is one limitation on this form as it relates to some of the youth clubs, especially the feeder sports clubs. The requirement to hold nonprofit status is actually cost and administrative burden to these programs that I think is not necessary. In many cases, these clubs are not holding a 501c3 status or a 501c status, but they are clubs that don't profit. There are tons of volunteers behind these activities. So I do feel very strongly that the requirement to hold the nonprofit status is an undue burden on these youth athletic clubs that are feeder programs to our high schools. But I do support the request for those clubs to submit to financial audit upon request, because I think it's reasonable that, if there's a reason that the district should be able to look at the finances of that. I know that the district has benefited financially from some of the funds related to those clubs, so I do believe a lot of that is coming back, but I just want to acknowledge that 501c status is a pretty significant cost and effort burden to a lot of these clubs that are volunteer run.
I can go back and talk to Mr. Clark and the athletic directors to see what would be the rationale for having that status in place.
Yeah.
And we can come back. The form is more for information tonight. It's not
Okay.
actually part of the policy. So this was generated based off of our needs as a district. So
Yep.
we can certainly go back and investigate that.
And I recall a few meetings a few years ago where this was discussed, and I think it's a good thing, I think, to have those clubs registered and aligned with the schools. So I think what you're saying, Dr. Cook, is that the feeder programs would be essentially authorized and supported by the athletic directors and the varsity coaches within the high schools.
Correct.
And we would recognize those with the same rights and privileges as we would a district-sponsored club or activity. It would not be viewed as a community group,
Correct.
provided that they're following that process.
Correct.
Okay, we'll put that on hold.
Well, the form, the policy is the policy language. The form.
Oh, the form is not.
Supplemental.
I'll do some homework on that.
We
That was
can-
just more for the
Okay,
committees.
okay, so we can proceed with the policy, understanding that we're going to review the form,
Correct.
which isn't part of the policy anyway. Is that okay? Kelly?
I am okay approving the policy. I will just say that if this requirement for nonprofit status is determined to be an absolute, that I think we would need to bring this back for
We'll
discussion.
bring it back. Greg?
The fourth one from the bottom in that list of 9, conduct background checks on adults who will have contact with athletes, only athletes? Or is it any person responsible for a club?
These feeder programs have been tied to athletics. So they've been tied to athletic-type activities. That's what our athletic and activity directors are
Up on top.
Oh, okay.
are monitoring.
Okay, so there would be
I-
a connection there too.
I can look and
Some
see if
sort
this
of-
is correct. If this is used for A theater program or something like that, I could certainly check if it would be more applicable to say with students and athletes. But right now, this form has been used, to my knowledge, for athletic activities. So again, it'll be follow-up I do with the ADs.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay, so far with the policy itself, the only thing we've done is eliminate the word competitive on the first page, or first page. We will proceed separately with the form and how it's being used.
Correct.
Okay.
Just a question on the form itself. I know this was designed for athletics. Do all clubs, organizations, wherever they are, they fill this form out or something similar, or?
If they're affiliated with the district to the scope that this policy would cover, yes, they would.
Okay.
And our ADs have paid very close attention to that, particularly in the last several years.
Okay.
Then going back to the situation that Dr. Piasek had referenced a few years back.
Okay. I'm seeking a motion on policy 2430.
So moved.
Okay.
I'll second.
Seconded by Kelly. You get both those, Julie? Okay. Further questions, discussion? Okay, at this point, then, all in favor of accepting policy 2430 as revised, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, Julie. And we will be hearing from you about that form itself. Okay. Policy 9270, home-based, private, and tribal schooling. The question there, the language in this policy has been revised to clarify the options private school or tribal school students, private school or tribal school students have for participating in certain athletic and extracurricular activities. And you'll see those on, some of it's just wording clearing up, but I have nothing much more to say on the policy. 2431, interscholastic athletics and district activities governs athletics and district activities. So we talked about that. One of those different policy. Suggestions for 9270? Seeing none, I'd be seeking a motion to accept it.
I'll move to approve 9270 as presented.
Motion made by Kelly and seconded by Anthony. Further questions or discussions on 9270? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting policy 9270, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, Julie. Okay. Now we have a cluster of policies that are coming to us basically out of the federal or state governments. We've been looking at them to see if we are able to comply with changes, if we have to modify anything in there. It's open to us. I'm going to deal with these again in groups because for the most part, it's the same policy for administration support, staff and support. So, 1422, Non-Discrimination and Equal Employment Opportunity Administration. 3122, Non-Discrimination and Equal Employment Opportunity for Professional Staff. And 4122, same thing for support staff. Joe, this has a lot of green on it, and
Correct. So
if you want to walk us through that.
yeah, a few years back, the federal Title IX law was changed, and we made some policy revisions at that time. There's been since some clarification around Title IX, particularly in investigation, how we would go about that process. These policies are very lengthy, 8 pages in length, and there's just a number of adjustments to those policies. I'm here to answer any questions as brought forward, but the recommendation to these changes is to stay in compliance with the legal update to Title IX.
And basically, you're saying that's what's in here. Yeah.
Correct. What you see in green is what's in policy.
And it's definitions, and
Yeah,
it's,
and it talks about, just for anybody who's watching, it provides definitions, day, military status, respondent, school district, community, third parties. It identifies Mrs. Sharon Thede and myself as our compliance officers. It talks about complaints of discrimination and retaliation. It talks about investigation, complaint and procedures, the complaint procedures. So there's many sections in here. It talks about what we would do if the compliance officer is not available or is the one who is accused. Talks about remedial action and intermediary steps, sanctions for discipline and such. So again, these policies, Mrs. Thede and I, the next batch of policies, we spent somewhere around 6 or 7 hours together going through these policies from Neola, from what's in our current handbook, from the training that we've had on investigating these things. So.
questions or suggestions for 1422, 3122, and 4122? Again, this has basically been looked at several times. This is the first time for us, though. I think this was,
Correct. This is the first
this was
time.
studied inside.
Yeah, we were going to bring this last month, but we wanted to take a little bit more time to review it. There's a couple of questions that we had, particularly as how the policy would align to our handbook, and we wanted to make sure that everything was lined up appropriately.
Okay. Seeing no discussion, unless you have some discussion, I'll be seeking a motion to accept these three policies.
So moved.
Moved by Greg, seconded by?
Me.
You.
Second.
Kelly Piasek, okay. Further questions or discussion? If the public is wondering about this, you have to understand that some of this stuff is given to us, and we are just wanting to see if we are in compliance with it. And then basically, that's what we're talking about here today, and that's why there isn't major debate or recalls on it, so. With that little statement, I will seek all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, Julie. And now we have 1422.02, 3122.02, and 4122.02, which are obviously spun off of the ones we just finished. And quite simply, these are a non-discrimination based on genetic information. Again, administration, professional staff, and support staff in three policies, but all worded the same. I believe so. I didn't find any mistakes, differences.
Correct. The language is the same. It does talk about what genetic information is, what we must do as an employer if that genetic information is shared with us mistakenly. The term genetic information, just to be clear, does not include information about the sex or age of an individual, the sex or age of family members, or information about the race or ethnicity of individual or family members that is not derived from a genetic test. As used in this policy, genetic test means an analysis of human DNA, RNA, chromosomes, proteins, or metabolites that detect genotypes, mutations, or chromosomal changes. The term includes any test of a person's DNA or RNA. So just to be clear, this is part of updated non-discrimination guidance that we're given. It also identifies and it ties it to policy, in this case 1422 or 3422, 4422, which talks about the complaint procedures, the compliance officers and such. So there's a direct connection there.
Okay. Same activity here. If you have any questions or discussion items you want to present, do so. If not, we'll move forward with motion.
There is one small administrative correction I'm going to submit to Dr. Cook, just where there's some inconsistency around the use of board and district. I think it
Sure.
was just an oversight, but it does not change the substantive
Okay.
content of the policy.
So that's a technical change?
Yeah.
Joe, can you handle it?
Yep, we can handle that.
Thank you.
Thank you for bringing that forward.
With that, I will ask for a motion for approval of 1422.02, 3122.02, and 4122.02.
So moved.
Approved? Motion?
So moved.
Thank you. And Anthony is seconding it. Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
4-0. Oh, excuse me, 0. Nay? None. 4-0, Julie. Jumped the gun on that one. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
And similarly, moving on, the next one is non-discrimination. Oops, I think I missed one. Must be stuck together. I'm out of place. Disability, there it is. Non-discrimination against disability, prohibition against disability discrimination in employment. And that is 1623, 3123, 4123. Joel?
Yep, these again talk about discrimination based off of disability. 7-page policy that includes definition updates such as complainant, days, respondent, district community, and third parties. It goes on to talk about providing definitions that were currently in policy but just highlighted now in this policy. There's a subheading, for instance, for impairment that substantially limits a major life activity, qualified individual with a disability. They gave these subheadings. It's more structural and helpful in our implementation of the policy. It does include facilities, the excluding of a person with a disability from a facility. This at one time was an issue for us, like around Butler, before we put the elevator in Butler. So we are, we don't have that from a facility standpoint right now. And then there is some clarification around privacy and confidentiality, remedial action and monitoring, sanctions and disciplinary action, and then the expectations around education and training. Plus the requirements, and they have been put more towards the back of the policy, around maintaining the records from an investigation, what is all included in the maintenance of records from that.
And I guess, quite simply, you would support that we are doing all of this as it is. I mean, we're in sync with this?
Correct. We are in compliance with the policy update. It's just a matter now of getting the policy
Okay,
up to date with practice.
so it's in our
Yes.
files, yeah. Questions or discussion for this? Then I will be seeking a motion for these three policies: prohibition against disability discrimination in employment.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Moved by Kelly and seconded by Greg.
All three, 1623, 3123, and 4123.
Oh, yes, I should have asked it that way. Thank you. Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting 1623, 3123, and 4123 as presented, please say aye.
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 Aye. And opposed? 4-0, Julie. You getting used to those words? Thank you. Okay. Now we have policy regarding employee anti-harassment, administration, professional staff, support staff, and I believe the student one is different, enough different that we won't include it in the clusters, Joel. It's worded differently, right?
Yeah, there's some changes, some differences between the staff policy and the student policies in this.
So let's just talk through the first three then, as I said.
Sure. So the staff policies have been updated, again, to provide some clarification around definitions in the policies. So again, complainant, day, respondent, that provides us some framework for our investigation. It does add in bullying, to the harassment policy, just so that oftentimes when we are investigating bullying and harassment, we want to ensure that we're making sure that we treat the incident or incidences that have happened appropriately. Is it a bullying incident? Is it a harassing incident? So it talks about what those are. That is built into the policy now. It does delineate sexual harassment, which is covered under Policy 2266, Non-Discrimination on the Basis of Sex and Education Programs Activities. We want to make sure that the proper Title IX protections are provided for sexual harassment. It does include some prohibitive acts that constitute sexual harassment. So there are a number listed. Some of those were in our policy already, but we did add items G, H, and I on page 4 of 14, asking or telling about sexual fantasies, preferences, or activities, speculations about a person's sexual activities or history, giving unwelcome personal gifts, and leering or staring at someone in a sexual way. So those 4 are new, including item number L, inappropriate boundary invasions by a district employee or other adult of the school district into a student's personal space or personal life. So we did add in a few more descriptors that will be beneficial to us if we have to investigate these things. It does provide clarification around national origin and ancestry around anti-harassment. It builds in reports and complaints of harassing conduct, again, to help in the investigation, make sure that we are following all of the proper procedures. And it does set some timelines for us. You can notice 2-day timelines and such. So we want to make sure that we're providing proper response time, plus a proper investigation period to address any complaints of harassment. This policy does also, again, clarify some investigation and complaint procedures. And it does talk about, and I'm just going to forward to the end, what we would do around sanctions and discipline, retaliation and remedial action in cases of harassment among staff. So we'll take the student one later, so that's why I'm focusing on the adults in the organization first.
So same question, and we are in,
We are currently operating this way. Once the policy is passed, we'll be making sure that that's fully disseminated across the system if it's passed in its current form.
okay. Any questions on this one? Anthony?
Yes, thank you. One thing that seems to run throughout all these, even especially into the student policy, is the harassment, which also includes hate speech. Do we have a definition anywhere for hate speech?
I don't have a definition for you right now. There is a definition of hate speech. I'm racking my brain here. I think it is embedded in the policy. If you give me 1 minute,
Excuse me. I didn't see it, but that doesn't mean it's not there. I wasn't able to find
Mrs.
it.
Steedy and I did,
There's 2 examples that you gave.
yeah, I'm trying to remember where they are.
I think it would be one of those lists of things, but it's not.
If you look at 3362 on page 3, top of page 3, there's a definition, well, not a definition, there is an example. Harassment also includes hate speech, and then a definition of hate speech and 2 examples. And I'm
Yes.
gonna-
And the 2 examples
Yeah.
below it.
Correct.
Okay.
Okay, that's what they're doing.
And that's in all 3 policies.
Yeah.
A reason for asking it, obviously, the idea of hate speech has always been somewhat in the eye of the beholder. A very obvious one that all would agree on would be swastikas. But and especially with the ongoing debate of signage that we've had, we have had some people say, okay, something was done to this sign, and that was hate speech. Something was done in opposition to that, that was hate speech. I think the problem may be going forward, and I don't know that the policy can even address it. I guess what I'm looking for is more, how do we address this internally when these accusations come to the forefront of really discerning between what is truly somebody doing something out of some type of prejudice they have versus what we would call bullying or harassment, generally speaking.
So when we get a complaint of harassment or bullying, we have the procedures that are set forth. The policy outlines what we would do. It's included in that is sitting down with the victim and listening to what the victim has to say. And you're listening for, has it happened frequently? How did it make you feel? What was the impact on the victim? What, as a result of the act, what are some things that happened to you at school? Did you not feel comfortable going to school, whatever it is? And that's how you start to determine the impact. We also look at interviewing not only the person who did it, but witnesses to it. And so through that investigative process, you're able to get the best picture that you can get of what happened. And when we've had to investigate these things in the past, it's not always what the victim said or what the accused said, but it's what the bystanders who saw it, what the peer group has said about it, what the staff members who were present and saw the impact. That helps us discern, is it harassment? Is it bullying? Was it inappropriate behavior that resulted in, discipline? So oftentimes when we do these investigations, you're interviewing a handful plus of kids. It's not just the accused and the victim. We will ask people who are interviewed, is there anybody else who you think could provide us information? And often when we say that, we'll get 2 or 3 names from students, or we might hear from teachers that there were other witnesses to it, other staff members that were witnesses. So it's through that investigative process. You're going back to the definitions that were provided, but you're also looking then at the impact. So it does go, the definitions give us some guide, the process gives us some guide, but the story that's told by multiple people helps us decide, was it harassing, was it discrimination, was it bullying, was it inappropriate conduct, and that then can dictate discipline and follow up after that.
Okay.
Thank you. That was thorough. Oh,
Go ahead.
Did you ask?
you haven't, she said,
Okay. Dr. Cook, does that investigation involve you and the HR department, or
One or the other.
it could be both?
We have-
Could it be both sometimes?
It could be both, but sometimes one of us is kept out of it because we then could act as a review.
Okay. Sure.
In the case that.
Like unbiased.
Right, yeah, so if Sharon is investigating something, and she will keep me completely clueless as to what's going on, and vice versa, so that if there was ever a need for review, it could be brought forth to the other person and that they could take a look at it.
Sure.
So we do that, but we do have, we've worked with our firm, our law firm, to come in and provide professional development to the investigators, a higher degree of professional development to Sharon and I, and then general training for all of our principals and teachers on these topics. So what we want to have is people who are trained to investigate it, but we want everybody to understand that there's an absolute need to bring forward, any claims of harassment, any claims of bullying, so that they can be dealt with immediately.
Yeah, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Kelly?
Thank you. So I just have a structural and a substantive comment and question regarding the section on bullying, and it's in all 4 of the policies. So I like the addition of the definitions. That's helpful. As it flows into bullying, I wasn't clear. Is this intended to be a section that is defining bullying and then it's followed by sexual harassment definition, or is this actually the beginning of policy statements? Do you understand what I'm asking?
So,
Because it flows from definitions,
correct.
school district, community, third parties, and then bullying. It reads as though it could be a definition, but I believe that it's intended to be policy content. Or are these all
Do you remember
definitions?
from the drafting? I apologize,
No,
it's
that's
not. I believe it sits as a definition in this policy because we have a policy specifically on anti-bullying.
Okay.
And so that policy is referenced when a claim of bullying comes forward, and through the bullying investigation, if we see that it's more harassment, then we shift over into a harassment investigation.
So we may just need some clarification, because there's the word bullying, and then it says, the first sentence says bullying rises to the level of harassment. So we haven't actually defined bullying. We've jumped right to bullying rises to the level of harassment. And so we've removed the section on harassment and added the section on hate speech. I think there's just some readability issues there.
Julie's going to check in the drafting document as to how that appears. It could be a heading in the policy, or it could be part of the definitions. If you give us 1 second, we can look into
No
that.
problem. And then maybe while she's looking at that, could I bring up just a substantive
Sure.
comment? So towards the end of this added section that begins with bullying rises to the level of harassment. I know this is a nit, but there's, the last sentence says, that is severe or pervasive enough to create an intimidating, hostile, or offensive educational or work environment, semicolon, cause discomfort or humiliation. And I'm struggling with, not because I don't have empathy, but the phrase cause discomfort is very, very broad. If I have a rock in my shoe, I'm uncomfortable. And I think there are things that happen that can cause discomfort, but may not rise to the level of harassment or bullying. So I'm curious, is that coming from Neola? Is that coming from state?
This is coming from the federal and state language on.
Pretty broad.
It is.
Right.
And I certainly understand what you're saying, but that's the purpose of the investigation for us, is to determine if that level of discomfort falls into the category of bullying. Was it a one-time action that led to discomfort, or did that discomfort, carry on for days, weeks, whatever it might be? That's the purpose of the investigation. Because I agree with you that there's a lot of things along the way for youth, even for adults, that can make you uncomfortable, but we don't want that discomfort to last in our schools. If we can intervene and head that off, we want to be able to do that.
Joanne looked it up, and that's exactly what came to us.
That is. So we'll do some clarifying on where the bullying fits as a subheading or as a part of the definitions.
I think even as any district, as a community, the difference between bullying and harassment, obviously we have different categories for how we capture those. So I think helping people understand the difference would be helpful. I'm not particularly adamant about this phrase, cause discomfort. I think it's part of the investigation. It just is a really broad category that doesn't have a whole lot of context around it.
Yeah, and I think, from just to discern and for the general public, I mean, harassment, these terms start to fall into, is it harassment based on race, color, national origin, age, sex, including gender status, change of sex, sexual orientation, gender identity, pregnancy, creed, religion, genetic information, handicap or disability, marital status, citizenship status, veteran status, military service, ancestry, arrest record, conviction record, use or non-use of lawful products off the district premises. So this really falls into a specific definition of protected class. Bullying can exist across any group. Whether you fall into any of these protected classes or not, you can be the victim of bullying in school, and we want to make sure that, we have our staff and administration understand the difference of what is bullying and where does bullying live. Hopefully it doesn't live in the system, but it does exist, and where is harassment, and what truly does harassment mean? And so that's part of the education that we have to do with our staff and with our student body.
Joe, if we accept this, we have the authority that we can make it, I don't want to say prettier, but there is some confusion as to which is which down there.
Yeah, so certainly we
We
can.
could fix that with a technical correction, right?
Right, and it would be from just a stylistic standpoint.
Yes.
Once everything is approved, you would see bold and underlined and green go away, and so you'd see all those definitions in text. If it was, in the after the drafting of it is done, if it was a subheading, bullying would be bold, and then all of the underlined green after that would be,
The words.
would be black, regular,
Yeah.
print.
And in the student policy, that's how it's laid out, is that it's actually
A heading.
a heading.
Yeah.
So bullying is defined in the student policy. And I would be comfortable moving that definition over to the staff policy to avoid having to bring this back. But I would want to have the rest of you take a peek at that and know that you're comfortable with inserting that. But I think it's a pretty inclusive definition.
So if we inserted, just for clarification, what's on the bottom of 2 under bullying? Bullying is prohibited by 5517. Bullying is defined as deliberate and intentional behavior using words. If we added that in under bullying and then carried on with the rest, that would be the proposed change, or a correction at.
Okay?
Yes. There's some, there's some inconsistencies definitely between the two, but I think the definition is acceptable. And I think that would help us close at least the employee-related policies.
Yeah, we're not into the student one yet. With that, yeah. Okay, so we are going to then, you're making the modification.
We can build that in there. The only thing that we wouldn't include in a staff policy would be bullying is prohibited by board policy 5517.01. That would be, because that relates to a student policy, so all the other language would fit within the scope of this area.
So that, I lost my sheet of paper here. I kept the student one is being kept separate. 5517, right? I didn't bring that up at the beginning. I stopped short of that, didn't I? Yeah. So, with that, you want a motion?
I would move to approve policies 1662, 3362, and 4362 with the inclusion of the definition of bullying taken from policy 5517.
I'll second.
Okay. Moved and seconded by Greg. Further questions or discussion? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0. Julie? If I can find the first sheet, there it is. Which leaves us still in this cluster with 5517, which was adjacent to what we were talking about before anyway, right? I gotta find it. Yes, this is.
So the student policy has been updated. There has been some reorganization of things in this policy, just so you know. They moved compliance officer around in here. We do offer, as part of this, student anti-harassment counseling services to any person, student who has been found subjected to harassment where appropriate and the person committed. We do have on-site staff that can help students adjust, within the school environment if they were a victim of this. We do have the definition update plus the notice update. We do have the inclusion of bullying rises to the level of sexual harassment under policy 2266. That is built in here. We do have the hate speech example that Mr. Zenobia referenced earlier. Dr. Piasek helped us clarify. We do have some additional clarification around threats or insinuations of a person's employment, wages, academic grade. That's built in. That is considered a prohibitive act. Unwelcome verbal expressions, including graphic sexual commentaries, that's built in. Sexually suggestive objects, pictures, graffitis, etc., that is built in to prohibitive acts. We're looking at also the addition of the pattern of conduct, which can be subtle in nature, that has sexual overtones and is intended to create or has the effect of creating discomfort and or humiliation to another. So that is built in under starting on page 4. where you get inappropriate boundary invasions may include but are not limited. We do add ancestry into this. Again, Mrs. Thiede and I are spelled out as the compliance officers. We then get into some of the nuances around the reporting expectations, the investigation, complaint procedures, the involvement of attorneys if we need to help us with the investigation. And then steps in for remedial action in particular when we have to deal with a situation like this, and then the expectations around not having any retaliation and consequences for retaliation.
Okay.
Further, we have the clarification around the records retention for an investigation.
And you would say we are in sync with this?
We are.
Okay. Discussion, questions?
Just one question.
Go ahead, Greg.
Dr. Cook, would policies like this be at least summarized or referenced in student handbooks?
The policy number is referenced in student handbooks. We have a public notification requirement around non-discrimination and anti-harassment. These are spelled out in the employee handbooks as well.
Okay. And then it references how to find those on the district website?
Correct. They're hyperlinked on the district.
Oh, okay.
So in the employee handbooks for sure, and the student handbooks, we worked the past couple summers to update them on the proper policy language.
Nice.
And after the board meets, after the committee meets, anything that's approved and in place, Julie does send an email out to our administration, making sure that they know what has been updated. Mrs. Thiede, has access to that for employee handbook purposes.
And those are probably listed on school websites and things like that?
Correct. The student handbooks and the employee handbooks are all on our websites.
Sure. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay. Any further questions? If not, we'll seek a motion? Moved by Anthony, 5517. Is there a second? Seconded by Kelly. Further questions? Seeing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And that passes 4-0 also, Julie. Okay, we're working our way through all the non-discrimination policies. At the moment, we are up to policy 2260, non-discrimination and access to equal educational opportunity.
This policy has been updated to talk about including, we're just going to kind of go page by page on page 2, the making sure that we have a program in place to serve our students with disabilities, that any qualified student with disability will be included to the maximum extent appropriate in the general education setting, and that any program that we have in place would be non-discriminatory in nature for students should they need to be pulled out for instruction in another environment. We talk about principal responsibilities. So we want to make sure that principal shall verify the procedures used with students and parents in selection of participation in any of the district's academic, co-curricular, do not discriminate on the basis of a protected class. So I want to make sure that we're reviewing what we're offering and make sure that there's no barriers based off of a protected class. Student access, again, that's an update on the bottom of the second page, similar to what we've mentioned above. We do provide definitions on the third page of the policy, similar to what you've read in other policies. Tonight, we do talk about some protections offerings for students who are English learners. Again, reporting procedures for non-discrimination or for being discriminated against begin to be spelled out on the bottom of page 3 and are more clarified on the top of page 4. Mrs. Thede and I, again, are mentioned on page 4 as our compliance officers. So we do review staff and student situations that are brought to us. We do have some clarification in our investigation and complaint procedures. And then we do have the built-in steps around remedial action and monitoring on the bottom of page 6, retaliation on page 7, and then education and training responsibilities on page 7. Also, there's some additions to the records retention around this policy. One technical correction, just to make sure is changed. We do not utilize Form 2260F2, so that would need to be struck from the policy on the top of page 5. That was missed by me in the editing portion of this.
C Form 2260F2 we take out, or
Correct, we
just
do not have.
just the
We
F2
do not utilize that form,
at all?
that at all.
Okay. Deleted that. And I'll ask it again, are we in compliance?
Yes, we're in compliance with our expectations, yes.
I know we've done a lot of this work, so that's positive. Questions, discussion? Is there a motion approving 2260?
So moved.
Moved by Greg, seconded by Anthony. That was clever, Anthony. Okay, further discussion? None? All in favor of approving policy 2260, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, Julie. Now it's 2260.01, 504, Section 504 ADA Prohibition against discrimination based on disability.
Similarly, in this policy, as the other policies, you'll see the definitions added. Particular to this policy, you'll see the definition of free appropriate public education for students under IDEA Section 504. Talks about making sure we have a program and services in place for students who have disabilities or impairments. We see the similar definitions from our other policies, some clarifications around headings that help us with the implementation of the policy. We talk about reasonable accommodations and facilities on the third page of the policy. You can see a large chunk of this. It was reordered. It was deleted beginning on the bottom of page 4. And then clarification around reports and complaints of discrimination and retaliation. And then towards the back of the policy, you'll see the built-in steps around remedial action and monitoring, sanctions and disciplinary action, impartial due process hearing, OCR complaint. That is something that's unique to disability. Complaints can be filed with the Office of Civil Rights. There's a section that was added in there on retaliation, and then education and training, and then the update to the records retention goes from page 9 into page 10 on the policy.
Okay, lots of green ink, but it's stuff we're doing.
Correct.
Questions? Motion? Oh, go ahead, Greg.
Dr. Cook, I assume there is a 504 plan if a student would need one? Or
Sure, yeah, so I
plan?
mean, yeah, if we have a student who requires accommodations based off an impairment, we have a process to identify 504 needs. Just like we have similar processes to identify IDEA-related
Right,
needs.
and updated yearly?
504 plans? Yes, they're updated yearly.
And then who's the person that would be directly responsible for monitoring that? The implementation.
The implementation of the 504 plan goes down to the individual classroom teacher.
Okay.
The school counselor or school psychologist, depending on the level, is the person who handles the annual review. We expect that the principals are part of the enforcement, I guess, of the plan, should it
Sure.
be needed for 504. So we have a number of school-based layers. We do utilize the IDEA process to identify 504 need. We want to rule out a need for special education before we go to
Sure.
accommodations. So,
Sure. Sounds good. Thanks.
you're welcome.
Just an administrative note on this one also has a reference to that Form 2260.
Thank you. We'll make sure that's deleted.
What was that?
This policy also
That's good.
refers to Policy
Oh,
22,
that same 5, yeah, okay. Where's that on
or Form, sorry.
Bottom of page 5.
page 5?
Yep, it'll be deleted in its final draft.
Oh, yeah. Okay, seeking a motion for the approval of policy 2260.01. Moved by you?
I'll move.
Kelly moves. Somebody seconding?
I'll second.
Seconded by Greg. Any further questions? Seeing none, all in favor of accepting 2260.01, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? 4-0, Julie.
Okay.
And that now has one. Oh, this is the group. This is the employment group. This is 3120, 3120.04, 4120, and 4120.04. Just for anybody that's listening, we have discussed this several times. Some I don't know if inconsistencies is the right word, but we're trying to get the way they're worded to be in sync with each other. Is that correct, Julie? Kelly, what you want to explain? It's fine. 'Cause-
Be happy to present this one. We had asked to kick it back from the full board just to make a consistency change, and so all of the language that begins in most of these on the bottom of page 1 and continues for some on the top of page 2 is now consistent, defining the terms under which relatives of board members or relatives of staff members may be employed by the board. So I am comfortable with all 4 of these.
Want to move right away?
I would move to approve all 4, yes.
Okay, we have been through that, and I'm looking for a second.
Second.
Seconded by Greg. Thank you. Further questions on these 4 policies? Yes,
I
Greg?
just have a question about the professional teaching permit. Dr. Cook, could you?
Which one are you in?
Let's see. Am I on? Let's see, which one is it? 31, is it 3120?
Could be. Let's see.
It is 3120. Page 3.
Page-
Just the extent that that's used in the district?
Sorry,
Is
I'd
that
have to have Mrs. Theedy talk about, to what degree we need to use that, that licensing avenue.
Right, doesn't seem like it's overly,
It's not used all that often, but
Right.
there may be a unique area where we have gone with the permit. I just don't know
okay. It's not
how
common,
many it
no.
would be. It's not a common practice. no.
Like a last,
Yeah, sometimes we run into situations, August going into September, where we
Sure.
have a passionate person who comes to us and we think that they're going to be a good teacher, but they don't have the teaching experience, the teaching certification, so.
okay,
But Mrs. Theedy could certainly provide an
Okay.
update on that.
Yeah,
at
sounds
HR.
good. Thank you.
Okay. Further questions on these 4 policies? Take them in a group. All in favor, please, accepting 3120, 3120.04, 4120, and 4120.04, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? What do you think? 4-0. Just to make sure you're still with us, Julie, thank you. All right, we have no items in the discussion for possible action, discussion for information items. have a recommendation for any future meetings, something you wanted to bring up? How are we looking for January?
What's that?
How are we looking?
I don't know right now. We're on the tail end of dealing with a lot of stuff right now.
Yes, I know you've had a bad.
So, Julie and I will go back to the office. We'll get these updates made and prepared for the January school board meeting. We will use a Friday update to give you guys an update as to what's coming from a policy standpoint. One thing that was not mentioned tonight, we've heard about harassment, bullying, discrimination. We didn't get into the consequences of those things. And so when you start to think of consequences, Board Policy 5600.01 talks about consequences for student misconduct. And so for anybody on the committee or anybody who's listening, when you think of well, what's the punishment? The punishment gets outlined in a level 1, level 2, level 3 offense. And each of the investigations would take us into what path we're at. Is it a level 1 offense that has administrative discretion? Is it a level 2 offense because of repeated actions? We're starting to rise that up. Is it a level 3 where you're starting to get into a pre-expulsion and an expellable type offense? When we deal with these things, we're allowed to put in remedial actions to help the victim of it. So, to the extent that we're not necessarily getting into, Joe is being expelled for the following, but we can put safety plans in place and we can take steps to make sure that I don't have any contact with Mr. Dietz if I've been bullying Mr. Dietz or harassing Mr. Dietz for anything. So we do have steps in place, but oftentimes the victim in these situations or in any of our disciplinary situations doesn't know what happened. Because we can't divulge that. That still becomes part of that protected student record. So I just want to make that clear as we've had this discussion on some pretty big items tonight. There's discipline associated with it if somebody does it. From a student and it can go from corrective conversation all the way up to expulsion, which is the most significant penalty that we have. In some instances, we'll refer things off to the police, and the police will step in too and add a citation for something or whatever it might be. For employees, it can go from something as low level as corrective conversation, letter in the file, all the way up to termination. So we do have those steps that we have in place for both students and staff. They're just covered from a disciplinary standpoint in a different policy than harassment or discrimination. This covers what it is and how we would go about investigating it and maintaining those records.
Thank you for sharing that, yeah. And we can now know where to look. Anything else for a future meeting that is bothering anybody? Good. I don't see anybody being bothered. Well, with that, our next meeting is January 18th. Yes, okay, sorry. And with that, we conclude. If we don't see you before, have a Merry Christmas.
Yeah, you too. Merry Christmas.